and welcome to I'm a Fan of That. I know we keep saying we're finishing the series, but bonus episodes just keep happening and just keep appearing in your feed, and honestly, what can we do about it? Nothing. You guys like it, we like it, so we're here. And this time we are here for a very, very special occasion. I am way too excited about this because we have been saying for 2 series that we're going to talk about this. And then we decided to talk about it with some people who know a huge amount about it. So we have guests.
Yay!
Oh my god, guests! We're here with Theo and Georgia from the Holmwood Institute, a podcast all about, well, I think I'll let them introduce it because I don't want to spoil it too much. And then I think everyone will guess what this episode is about the moment we do that. Hi guys, welcome!
Hello, thank you for having us.
Thank you. So our podcast is, we're currently doing a found footage horror podcast called the Holmwood Foundation, which is a direct sequel to the novel Dracula. So that's, I hope, what we're going to be talking about today is Dracula. And we're very excited about it. We're currently crowdfunding for a full season. You can listen to a pilot, which is available wherever you get your podcast.
Honestly, we're going to talk about Dracula, and I feel like Vivian's looking at me like, why? I'm surrounded by the 3 of you. No, it's okay, because you love it too.
I do, of course I do. I have read Dracula. I did enjoy it. I'm happy to talk about it.
I feel like I bully her into talking about all my favourite horror things, and I'm so sorry.
I do specialise in monsters. It's not like you have to pull my leg that
no.
hard.
To be fair, that is also me with Theo. I'm like, darling, would you like to see this new horror thing? And he's like, no. And I'm like, yes.
So why did you guys decide to go in for a Dracula sequel? Because we've seen Dracula done in pop culture a lot, right? Dracula is the thing. Everyone knows the Hammer horror movie. They know the one with Gary Oldman, which I have problems with. It's beautiful, but there are problems. They misused Keanu Reeves so badly. But yeah, Dracula is pretty staple in the same way that Frankenstein is. So how come you guys decided to go in for a full, and I'm assuming it's a sequel to the novel, you said?
Yes, yeah, it's a modern day sequel to the novel, so it takes place about 130 years after the end of the book. I think because we've seen so many Dracula adaptations at this point, we deliberately sat down and watched as many as we could when we were writing this. And most of them are adaptations of the book. There are very few sequels, and if there are sequels, they tend to be kind of either like remixes or like Victorian sequels, so they take place a couple of years after the book. And most of the ones that we saw, barring a few exceptions, we felt very much mishandled the themes of the novel and the characters. Therein they tend to really favour Dracula as not a monster or like the typical vampire. He tends to be like the love interest, or like secretly very sexy, or and we weren't like our favourite characters in the novels are the Crew of Light, who are the main characters in it. So the Harkers, the Suitors, Van Helsing, and their characters and their interactions with each other, which for the time can be quite transgressive and quite sort of boundary breaking, gender norm breaking, and that we felt that was never really discussed or explored. So we wanted to have a little go at it and inject all of our favourite bits into it at the same time.
I love that. So, because if we're going to talk about those versions of Dracula that have been done over the years, we are a pop culture podcast, we've got to. Why do you think it is that Dracula, I mean, the book is genuinely worth the hype, and if you haven't read it, do read it. But why do you think it is that Dracula has ended up with this pop culture status as a movie monster, but also the kind of, like you said, the sort of sexy vampire kind of thing? Do you guys have any opinion on why that's happened and why we have had so many adaptations of this thing?
So I think it's a few factors. The first being that Mrs. Stoker, when Bram Stoker died, suddenly realised that this was her income. So she gave the rights away and made a lot of money by giving the rights away to Universal. So So that's why, it became well known, because she was trying to get people to know it so she could actually survive, uh, which is, part of the reason. And I think also, I think Hammer horror in particular are a massive reason as to why that is, and that's because I think Christopher Lee himself, I saw a little documentary series called 100 Years of Horror just yesterday, and they were talking about the fact that Christopher Lee himself was like, oh, I saw him as an anti-hero. I saw Dracula as an anti-hero, and he played him that way. He made him dark and sexy and dangerous. And because Hammer were trying to make X-rated films that, appeal to audiences, sex sells. So they designed this kind of monstrous character and made him more of a kind of ambivalent villain instead, and which
I mean, he
obviously
did get
is
increasingly.
very strange. Go on.
He did get increasingly more monstrous as the Hammer horror films went on. I think there's, I can't remember how many. There's like 8 Dracula sequels in Hammer horror, and I think as Christopher Lee got increasingly more frustrated with being typecasted as his character and less willing to play Dracula, he demanded less and less lines until Dracula just had no lines in any of the Dracula films, and they made him more of this animalistic monster, which is an interesting sort of transformation for the character, which obviously didn't stick because we continue to have this sexy version of Dracula. But it's an interesting, which was entirely just based on Christopher Lee not really wanting to be involved anymore.
Because a lot of in that way that, so I very much subscribe to the idea of vampires as a metaphor for sexual repression. I think they're quite an interesting way of talking about that. I feel like there's a lot of there's an incredible amount of academic study on Dracula, and Bram Stoker maybe talking about some stuff in his own life, which we'll get onto. But the kind of stuff with the Gary Oldman version particularly, where Dracula becomes almost like a love interest for Mina, of all characters, is very strange. But why do you think people ended up going down that route? Do you think it is just because Mina particularly is a character that people are drawn to, and so the two of them are quite magnetic in the book, like they do kind of represent a lot of the, Mina is very much sort of representative of the side of light in herself, along with Lucy, but obviously what Lucy happens to Lucy is very sad. Do you think there's a reason for that people are drawn to those, or is it purely just boy, girl, must make the kiss?
I mean, I personally think, I could be completely wrong, my knowledge of film theory is not very complete, but I think it's because the Universal film sort of began to edge down that route with making Mina compelled towards Dracula rather than forced into the situation that she is at the end of the book. I think because that film became so popular and it became so many people's gateway to Dracula rather than reading the book. I think most people have seen a film version rather than having read the novel, just because it's a novel Victorian novel and all of that. I think people then adapted that concept rather than the concept from the book, and then it became just like a game of telephone, really, all the way across the years. It became people adapting that, and then adapting the next film, and then adapting the next film. So the theme became stronger and stronger and stronger until we get to the Coppola film, the Gary Oldman version, which is very much rooted on this. And then you see films after that then adopting the idea of Mina as like this reincarnated love of Dracula, and they are compelled across the ages to love each other, when in the original novel the situation with Mina and Dracula is very much more like assault. It's very it's dark, it's unwanted, it's very, very nasty. And then you see the modern interpretations is very much willing. So yeah, I think it's kind of a game of film telephone.
Unless you're Stephen Moffat.
Yeah.
I still don't understand what was going on in that version. To this day, do not understand it. As talked about at the beginning of this, I am Jonathan Harker's #1 fan, and I think you guys are too.
So are we.
But I'm going to say something a little bit controversial, not particularly about Jonathan Harker, but about how the book sets him up as the final girl. He is the final girl of the horror movie, and I think it's brilliant that he actually manages to get out of the castle, because in most situations he wouldn't. What is it about Jonathan Harker that is really compelling and that you guys have locked into that maybe other adaptations haven't?
I don't know. I mean, for me personally, it's just so refreshing to see him, like, he has a very... He's a lot more like, as you say, like the final girl in the horror story. He is the damsel in distress for the beginning of the book. Absolutely. I mean, he's, you know, in terms of gender roles, he feels very much more like the woman in the story in traditional kind of horror films. But I just love, like, this transformation from this man going through it to finding out, oh, actually, no, this isn't made up, this isn't pretend. This actually, like, everything that happens from the castle did happen, and he's not, you know, he's not ill, and that people believe him and people trust in what he's written and go off and fight this monster with him. And yeah, I don't know if... And also I think it's the subject of the fact that, like, when he's in the castle and he meets the vampires, like the vampire brides and Dracula, he's like, these are monstrous and barbaric and I want them defeated. But the moment his own wife is potentially becoming a monster, he's like, yeah, okay, fine, if I have to become one, that's fine. Like, he completely switches course. And it's just like, you're like, okay, are you alright, Johnny? Like, he immediately, like, he suddenly realizes, like, okay, maybe I was, like, you know, this is wrong, but I would rather be wrong in this. And it's like a fascinating look at the character from where he began.
It's his dedication, his love, the force of his love for Mina is just, you feel it throughout the entire book.
Yeah.
And it's basically, you know, so much of why he survives the castle is because he wants to get back to his wife so desperately. The reason he gets out of his brain fever after his escape is because he loves Mina so much. And then as soon as she gets in danger, as soon as she, you know, like Theo says, begins to turn into a vampire, he has this full, like, I think on Tumblr it's called, like, his white-haired anime boy transformation. He becomes, like, this stone-cold, badass, knife-wielding killer whose only intention is to murder Dracula. And it's such a contrast from the original Jonathan that you meet at the start of the book, who's this very polite, quite timid, he's just passed his exams, he doesn't want to do anything wrong. And he just goes full, like, he stops being the final girl and he starts being, you know, the badass superhero, just because he loves his wife so much. And I think there's this concept that he is, one, willing to become a vampire for her, so she's not alone. And then also to murder everyone else in the party if they decide to kill Mina. And why would you turn Dracula into the love interest when you have Jonathan Harker right there?
I think everyone would want Jonathan Harker on their team.
Yeah.
I love him. I do think that Jonathan Harker, he is the man who drinks his I love my wife juice every day. Every single day. But I can maybe see why maybe some slightly toxic Hollywood types might not be into that kind of male hero over the sexy anti-hero. I don't know. Maybe there's a question to be asked of people there.
I mean, it's part of storytelling, right? Because when you had a storytelling for forever, even when it was only orally, each person had their own versions of it and it would transform, not because it was a bad form of memory, but because that's how you tell stories, is you do your version of it. And I think that what you need to be saying at different points in time is different. So what was important social commentary in England in the 1800s is not going to be the kind of thing that's important to be talking about now. And, I mean, some of that stuff can carry over, but some of it is going to be really different just because social attitudes are different, the politics is different, everything is different. And so, you know, things like the same story is going to look really different, but not because people just are willy-nilly. It's because they actually are trying to say something different for a reason.
I think it's interesting that when you look at Dracula as a story, I think actually if you look at Okay. Again, controversial. If you look at what Dracula is, it is found footage horror. I think everyone should read it because it is actually worth reading. And you guys are doing found footage with that. I think actually, weirdly, one of the closest Hollywood things to what the original Dracula is the Blair Witch Project. Like, that is the closest to understanding what Dracula is like to read. And it's interesting that nobody has done a found footage Dracula story in this way in a mainstream context yet. So was that part of what compelled you guys to do your podcast? Really does lend itself to found footage. So was that part of what compelled you to do this version in this way? So I think we should probably start talking about what you guys have done with your version since we've talked about everybody else.
Yeah, we had the idea for the Holmwood Foundation for quite a while. I think we've been talking about it since about 2020, so we've sort of had it in the back of our minds for a little while. But we weren't really sure how to approach it, because at that point Dracula wasn't really in vogue. It wasn't, I mean, it was, Dracula was always popular, but it wasn't, popular. So we were like, okay, we could probably just file the numbers off and turn it, into a book about something else, because we're both writers, and we both write primarily audio fiction, and we work a lot for Big Finish. We do a lot of Doctor Who stuff, so we both write anyway. But yeah, we were thinking, we could turn it into a book series, we could do something else with it. We both like this idea, but we're not sure what to do. And then about May of this year, I was watching a found footage film for another podcast where we were discussing just a film called Grave Encounters, which is like it's found footage, but it's a ghost hunting TV show that goes wrong. And I made Theo watch it with me, because I like to make Theo watch horror films with me when he doesn't want to. And we were at a convention, and we were selling some art stuff, and there wasn't a lot going on, it was quite quiet. And we were discussing this film that we'd watched, and we said, oh, do you think our idea for Holmwood wouldn't fit a found footage thing? And because we now write a lot of audio fiction, do you think it would fit an audio fiction found footage narrative? So we started writing it, and lo and behold, that was the best area for it. It just worked immediately in as far as we were concerned, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And then suddenly here we are, about 6-7 months later, and we've made the first episode. So yeah, it was just a lot of really good timing, and then watching things and being inspired by things that we were watching at the time.
Because obviously Dracula, as you say, it's sort of come back into vogue. Dracula Daily has, I think, had a lot to do with that. It's Tumblr's favourite thing of this time of year is to do Dracula Daily. And who'd have thought Tumblr would still be relevant in 2024? Not me. So do you think there is an appetite for Dracula again right now, outside of Tumblr? Because Tumblr, I think, will always have an appetite for the weirdness.
I mean, I think, looking at, Nosferatu obviously coming out, and we had The Last Voyage of the Demeter as well last year, which has only just come out on Prime, so we can now finally watch it. I think it
finally reached the UK.
It finally reached the UK. The running joke that we didn't have the rights for so long, finally it's arrived. So I know what we're doing this weekend. But, there has been an appetite for vampire media. There was Annabelle, I think, recently, which is the vampire child, which I've not watched yet, because as George has previously mentioned, I am not a horror girly. I'm not a horror anything. I like my gothic horror. I grew up with a lot of dark fantasy, so I like horror elements and I like monsters, but I usually see them in the guise of something like Pan's Labyrinth. I don't consider a horror, but it is horrific. I don't know. You know what I mean? I cross that. I walk the tightrope very closely. If they describe it as a horror, I'm likely to go no. If they describe it as a dark fantasy, I will watch it. So weird. But anyway, so yeah. So I think there is a lot more appetite for it, and obviously the copyright for Dracula did end. I think in not long ago. I think it was 2020. I think is when the copyright ended. So I think there's a lot of people going, oh, we can do stuff with the copyright now. So I think there has been a bit of more of an appetite for it. But yeah, it is an odd one. I don't know exactly what it is. I mean, for us, certainly we felt that Dracula Daily did cause a lot of conversation and conversation around the novel, which was really nice. Like, it wasn't like, oh, we're talking about Hammer again. It's like, oh no, we love Quincy. Why is Quincy not in all the adaptations? Or why is Arthur Holmwood treated like this? He's just lovely. He has dogs and a load of money. Like, why is he not in the, stuff like that, where people were discussing things that were really like about the novel that I hadn't seen being discussed for so long. And I was like, oh, so people are picking it up and reading it in a way that they hadn't for a long time. And I think it, sometimes Tumblr does kind of leak out, does infect other social medias, and the way that social media does kind of, has definitely broken containment, I think. So yeah, I can't tell you exactly why. I think Dracula Daily and things like Dracula, which is an adaptation of Dracula done over audio form, so you can listen to it as a podcast. So you can listen to from the 3rd of May to, is it today, or I can never remember which day Dracula, the Dracula fight is. I think it's today or tomorrow. I always forget.
It's the 7th, so that's
the 7th. It's the 7th. So yeah, so it's coming up. So there is, like, you can listen to it the whole year almost, because it's so long running. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a nice community around it now. It's nice to be part of it.
I'm very glad that you're going to be part of it, and I'm so excited for your podcast. The pilot is excellent, and the cast is excellent, and I have to massively blame Alistair Stewart for showing me that it existed. He's a lovely man who plays horrible people. You think people need to know where to find this podcast more than anything else? You're on Acast?
Yeah, so we're on Acast, which means we're also everywhere else.
Yeah.
So you can find us on Spotify, you can find us on iTunes. If you type us in, we are everywhere. I had a look at all of our links earlier and I was like, I don't know half these places, but I'm very glad we exist there. If I can give a log line of what the show
absolutely.
is.
Sell it to everybody now.
So as Theo said, it's a horror fiction, found footage podcast. It's a modern day sequel to Dracula. And it's two co-workers at the mysterious Holmwood Foundation, who are possessed by the ghosts of Jonathan and Mina Harker, and are forced to carry Dracula's severed head across the Yorkshire moors towards London, while they are pursued by any number of terrible, nasty vampiric creatures.
I love it. I'm so excited. I also, at the end of this episode, have promised that we will do a shout out for another podcast, which I think you guys know, which is Project Daydream,
yes.
which is out now, and my episode that I did myself is out this week, so everyone should go and listen to it and give Moira and the crew some love, because they have worked so hard on that podcast as well. Thank you so much for coming on. If you guys want to go and follow them on social media, on Acast, on Spotify, on Apple, wherever it is you get your podcasts, do go and support their Kickstarter, which is linked across all your social media as well.
Yes.
We'll also link it in the description below, along with many other things.
Honestly, you guys, it's going to be great. You have done such an amazing job with it. The pilot is brilliant, and I'm so excited to see where it goes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
And letting me talk about Dracula, but in a controlled way.
I mean, if you join our Kickstarter, you can join a lot of other people who love Dracula in our Discord server. And they talk constantly about Jonathan Harker. So if that's, again, anyone's interest, we do have lots of Harker fans in our Discord server. All happy
dangerous
to talk more
place.
about Dracula. Very
we'll all
dangerous.
get out our knives and hunt down vampires. Please do go and gather these guys your support, and remember to, whenever you listen to us or anyone else, like, review and subscribe. It's very important. It does help. And thank you very much for listening to this bonus episode. I am Holly Swinyard, and I feel like I've talked too much this episode.
I have been Vivian, and I'm sorry for being a bit quiet, but I was so interested in hearing Georgia and Theo talk that I I just kind of sat back and enjoyed it.
And we will see you at Christmas now.
Yeah, unless there's another strange bonus episode that drops very suddenly.
And if you are enjoying the bonus episodes, there are more of them over on our Patreon. So go head over there. You can find it in our links.
Yee.
Thank you guys, and we will be around Dracula soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. Well, I'm pressing the button, so I hope this is working. This is Madeline Townsend, Junior Archivist. I've just finished processing specimens 26 and 27, a knife and a silver ring from the Carpathians dig, and I'm about to unwrap specimen 28, a human skull, also unearthed during the Carpathians dig. So it looks like it arrived in one piece. You'll be pleased to hear that, Arthur. What? Hello? I can taste you. Is someone there? Mr. Larkin? Mr. Larkin? Look, I know how it sounds.
There's nobody else down here, Miss Townsend. Just you and the 50 boxes I'm paying you to document.
I know, but I heard someone. The intercom system isn't faulty, is it?
Undoubtedly. What isn't faulty in this place? Look, just do your job, please. Some of us would like to go home tonight.
What's that?
It's a containment breach.
A what?
A containment breach! How do you know?
Mr. Larkin?